Take off your gloves and put up your dukes. In today's episode of Hello Road, get ready for the battle of family sedans, 1984 style. The year is 1984. Apple just released the original Macintosh, ColecoVision was a hot commodity, Michael Knight filled TV screens across the globe, Care Bears lined the shelves at Kmart, jean jackets were all the rage, Phil Collins blared out of boomboxes everywhere, and a Demogorgon wreaked havoc on the small town of Hawkins, Indiana. Oh wait, I'm being told that last one is totally true. And what about the cars? SUVs were still specialty vehicles that were actually used off-road. Minivans were a brand new thing. Crossovers weren't even a glimmer in a product planner's eye. This is a time when the family car was actually a car. Mid-size family sedans ruled the road. But in '84, which one should you have purchased? Let's fire up the time machine and head back to 1984 so we can stage an epic battle between several US market mid-size family cars of that year. All right, that should do it. Safety first. All right, let's engage this thing. Whoa, this thing actually works. Rad. In this corner, we have the 1984 Toyota Camry. In this corner, we have the Honda Accord. Over here, we have the Mazda 626. Also joining us in this fight is the Chevrolet Celebrity. And let's not forget about the newly released 1984 Ford Tempo. Rounding off the contenders is the 1984 Nissan Stanza. Let the fight begin!
Body blow, body blow, body blow, body blow.
New for '84 is the Ford Tempo, replacing the boxy Ford Fairmont. The Tempo was the result of Ford's plan to introduce a more fuel-efficient and modern-styled car to compete with the influx of imports to the US. And they certainly did something right. The Tempo was the best-selling out of all the cars in this battle, moving over 402,000 examples that year. Bump that up to over 531,000 if you include its sister car, the Mercury Topaz. That's a ton of cars. Just for reference, compare that to the best-selling sedan of 2019, the Toyota Camry, which sold only 336,000 units. The design of the Tempo was a big leap from earlier Fords, a shift away from the boxes on wheels toward a more futuristic look. Not quite as revolutionary as the Ford Taurus that would arrive 2 years later, but still a move toward a more modern design. The Tempo's interior design wasn't quite as forward-thinking, quite simple, straightforward, and plain. The base engine was a carbureted 2.3-liter inline four-cylinder paired with either a 4 or 5-speed manual or an optional 3-speed automatic transmission. It pushed out a staggering 84 horsepower. The four-cylinder in this car didn't quite match the modern look of the vehicle. It was essentially 2/3 of a six-cylinder that was designed way back in the 1960s. The 2.3-liter was not known for its refinement, providing a great deal of noise and vibration. It was probably a bit overworked. I've seen 0 to 60 estimates that put the car at a leisurely 13 to 14 seconds. Slow, but not completely out of the ordinary for the era. There wasn't much exciting or fun about the '84 Tempo, just solid, basic transportation without much fuss. At the time, the EPA rated the car at 31 miles per gallon, but the EPA adjusted the way they calculated fuel economy in 2008 and again in 2017. So based on their updated calculations, the '84 Tempo would have only mustered 23 miles per gallon. This car could also be equipped with a 2-liter Mazda diesel, and my guess is they didn't sell many of those. The MSRP for the Tempo L was a bargain basement $6,840. It's the cheapest car here, but it also was a bit on the small side. Based on an extended Ford Escort platform, the Tempo was not quite a mid-size car. Throughout its run, the Tempo sold briskly. Strange to think that there were over 1.3 million first-generation Ford Tempos on the road. Where have they all gone? When was the last time you even saw one? It seems like they were decently reliable. Maybe most of these were victims of cash for clunkers. What do you think of the Tempo? Would you have bought one of these back in the day? Does the lens of nostalgia make these cars seem a little bit more appealing now than they did back in '84?
Have you driven the best-built American cars? Have you driven a Ford lately?
Up next, the Honda Accord. Before we talk about the Accord, let's take a brief look at the US auto industry in the early 80s. Reliability of late 70s and early 80s American cars was spotty at best, and the reluctance of US automakers to offer decent fuel-efficient offerings pushed customers to look at Japanese imports. Increasing market share of Japanese automakers caused tensions, with Japan ultimately agreeing to limit how many cars were exported to the US. This effectively limited the supply of Japanese cars that American consumers could purchase. Instead of American automakers focusing on making more desirable vehicles, they lobbied to reduce competition. These restrictions were eventually lifted in 1994, but they had a huge effect on the industry. They did ultimately drive more sales to US automakers, but because Japanese cars remained in demand, prices of those imports went up, costing American consumers an average of about 14% more per vehicle. So, how did Honda deal with this? In 1983, they opened a factory in Marysville, Ohio, and started building the second generation Accord right here in the US. The Accord was named to Car and Driver's 10 Best list that year, just one of the 34 times it's received that accolade. They said it sets the standard for small family sedans and that it was thoughtfully worked out and well balanced. There was no doubt that the quality of the Accord was quite high, even for this newly built US version. Demand was sky high. They sold 256,000 of these things in 1984. The Accord follows along with the early 80s trend of super angular boxy designs. It's plain but decently classy. The interior has a decidedly 1980s Japanese aesthetic, a bit busy by the standards of the day, but actually looks a touch sporty. Under the hood is a carbureted 1.8-liter inline four-cylinder pushing out a mere 88 horsepower. You could get a 4-speed auto or a 5-speed manual. 0 to 60 in just under 13 seconds is slow by today's standards, but back in '84 it was acceptable. Back in '84, the EPA rated the Accord's fuel economy at 33 miles per gallon combined city and highway. By today's calculations, that comes in at about 25 miles per gallon. What would all this cost you? A base suggested retail price of $8,549, the most expensive car in this roundup. Would you have purchased an Accord back in '84? Let me know in the comments below.
It can take you all the way to the top.
Up next, the 1984 Toyota Camry. Today, when you think Camry, you think of one of the best-selling, most ubiquitous cars on the road. But back in '84, Camry was a bit more foreign to US consumers. Toyota sold just about 94,000 Camrys in the US that year, well before they assumed dominance in the sedan market. When the first-gen Camry was introduced in '83, it was Toyota's first transverse front-wheel drive car, actually a bit late to the front-wheel drive game. But word of Toyota's reliability and Camry's comfortable ride kept spreading, resulting in increased Camry sales year after year. Where the Tempo ushered in curves and avoided straight edges, the Camry was similar to the Accord with its razor-sharp angles. The '84 Camry was available in a sedan and a 5-door liftback. The liftback would absolutely be my choice, but I don't think many of those have survived. When was the last time you saw one? The '84 Camry had a longer wheelbase than the Accord and was considered quite spacious for this class of vehicle. Interior was typical good Toyota build quality and could even be had with a digital dash. The car was simple, utilitarian, and quite reliable, but it didn't really have much to make it stand out in a crowd. And don't expect the Camry to be fun. Handling isn't exactly one of its strong suits. Powering the Camry is a carbureted 2-liter inline 4-cylinder making 92 horsepower. This could be mated to a 5-speed manual or a 4-speed auto with overdrive. Performance was typical early 80s, slow but acceptable acceleration. A 1.8-liter diesel was available in the States, but let's be honest, nobody bought those. Gas mileage was rated at 34 miles per gallon combined city and highway, but with today's calculations that drops down to 26. With a base price of $8,148, the Camry is the third most expensive car in this battle. What do you think of this first generation Camry? I love the boxy looks now, but would this have earned a spot in your driveway back in 1984?
What a feeling, Camry! Toyota!
Next up, the Chevy Celebrity. Introduced in 1982, the Chevrolet Celebrity was part of GM's plan to transition their mid-size family cars to front-wheel drive. Originally intended to replace the Malibu, it was sold alongside it for a few years. The launch of the Celebrity wasn't without a few speed bumps. Sharing some platform commonality with the Chevy Citation, early cars had issues with engine vibrations and problems with the engine control systems. But those issues were resolved as production continued. The shape of the Celebrity is simple, plain, and angular. I've long thought that it had a very unique but very awkward rear end styling. The concave curve on the back end of this thing was instantly recognizable, but not exactly my cup of tea. The interior came across like a continuation of classic 70s American cars rather than a look forward into the 80s. Under the hood is the carbureted 2.5-liter Iron Duke inline 4-cylinder mated to a 3-speed automatic. A whopping 92 horsepower are churned out of this motor. Performance is expectedly unenthusiastic. While unrefined, these motors were mostly regarded as reliable, with some going as far as saying that they were workhorses. The 84 Celebrity could also be had with a 2.8 liter V6 or a 4.3 liter diesel V6. And again, nobody bought the diesels. Gas mileage is fair, rated at 29 miles per gallon back in the day, and 23 miles per gallon with modern calculations. Suggested retail price started at $8,140, making it the third cheapest in this roundup. The Celebrity might be a bit dull, but it was a good old, honest American transportation device that could get you to work and back without much fuss. Would you drive one?
You're taking charge with Chevrolet.
Next up, the Nissan Stanza. Remember the Stanza? Don't feel bad if you don't. It was a decent car, had a nice interior with good fit and finish, comfortable ride, and perfectly acceptable exterior design. The Stanza just never made the same impact as the Camry or the Accord. While I couldn't find any sales figures for the 84 Stanza, I'm pretty sure it didn't sell all that well. In '85, it sold 64,000 units, well below Accord and Camry. The 84 Stanza could be had as a sedan, a 5-door liftback, or a 3-door hatchback, though I've actually never seen one of those in person. The interior is decently roomy for the class and the era, especially in the back. Early ads touted the ability to be able to cross your legs in the back seat. The Stanza is middle of the road when it comes to power, with its carbureted 2-liter inline-4 making 88 horsepower. 0 to 60 is estimated in the 12-second range, making it the quickest in this group, but not by much. Even though it had independent suspension all around, consumer guides said it lost its composure when the road got twisty. The Stanza was rated at 30 miles per gallon back in the day and 23 miles per gallon with today's calculations. Coming in at $8,299 for the base Stanza, it's the second most expensive in this list, just behind the Accord. So why did the Stanza never really take off? Perhaps in this incredibly competitive segment, the Stanza just didn't do anything much better than any of its competitors. Brand recognition might have been an issue as well, with Nissan jettisoning the well-known Datsun name just a couple years earlier. At the end of its run, the Stanza was replaced by the Altima. Anyone that remembered the Stanza quickly forgot, as the Altima obviously went on to become a top seller for Nissan.
See you a Datsun dealer.
Saving the best for last? You be the judge. Arriving to the battlefield is the 1984 Mazda 626. The 626 was highly regarded among automotive press. Along with the Honda Accord, the 626 was awarded with Car and Driver's 10 Best Award in 1984. A year earlier, it received Motor Trend's Import Car of the Year award. With a decent amount of standard equipment, good looks, and impressive handling, it was a package that garnered praise. The 626 was available as a 4-door sedan, 2-door coupe, and a 5-door liftback. And out of all the cars we've looked at today, the Mazda wins for me in terms of design. Car and Driver said all 3 626 versions have been sculpted into organic, fluid shapes that make most competitors look remarkably dated. It's clean, cohesive, and downright elegant for the era. Even the interior was thoughtfully laid out with a good use of space. The 84 horsepower that the Mazda's carbureted 2-liter inline 4-cylinder churned out was acceptable for the era. The Mazda is tied for last place with the tempo in the power department, but it still managed a 12-second 0 to 60 time, considered reasonably brisk for the era. And there was no shortage of acclaim heaped on the 626 when it came to driving enjoyment. Car and Driver said the 626 was eager to do business at the super legal speeds where the chassis really shines. When pressed hard, the 626 goes where it's pointed, hangs on tenaciously, and stops securely. I don't think they were saying that about really any of these other cars. Gas mileage is the same as the Stanza, rated at 30 miles per gallon back in the day, and a barely passable 23 miles per gallon by today's standards. With a starting price of $7,895, the most fun car here is the second least expensive, just behind the Tempo. If you were a driving enthusiast back in 1984 and still needed to cart the kids around, I'm pretty sure the 626 would have been at the top of your list.
Mazda 626.
So, who is the winner of this epic family car battle? Let's break it down into a few categories. Okay, so you're buying a family sedan because you're practical, right? And you've got kids to cart around. Let's look at practicality. This will actually be a tie between the Camry and the Stanza for the good use of space and rear seat comfort. Next up, what about efficiency? Camry easily wins here with an average of 34 miles per gallon or 26 miles per gallon with today's calculations. How about value? Hard to beat the Tempo. It's the bargain basement offering, but still managed to be a competent family car. What about quality? This is going to be a tie. Hard to imagine we could go with anything but the Camry and the Accord here. How about power? Camry and Celebrity come out on top with 92 horses each. Okay, what about style? With its European-inspired looks, the Mazda wins easily here. Okay, now to the important stuff. What about fun? The Mazda wins here again. Hard to imagine getting more driving enjoyment in any of these other cars. And which one would your 80s friends and family think was cool? It has to be the Mazda. Finally, let's look at all these cars through the lens of nostalgia. If we could fire up the time machine again, which one of these vehicles would you want to go back and experience? This one is easy for me. The Mazda 626, a compelling blend of style, value, and fun. This is the car that I'd want to bring back to the future.
The more you look, the more you like.
The Mazda Experience.
So there you have it. The Mazda 626 is the best midsize family sedan of 1984. What do you think? Which one would you drive? What other family sedans would you have considered back in '84? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.
Right, left, body blow.